Hey, what's up YouTube? It's your boy Circus, and this is my beginner's guide to how to prime your miniatures. In this video, we're gonna go over different techniques as well as brands that I use to get my minis to the tabletop. So without further ado, let's head to the workbench. All right, so now we're over to the workbench. I like to start off using some protective gloves to keep myself from scraping paint off my hands. First paint primer that we're going to check out is the Gray Sear. Gray Sear is an awesome neutral color paint that you can use, pretty much a go-to for everything. If you're not sure if you're going to go dark or light tones, I use it for a lot of different miniatures. Then we've got Chaos Black. Chaos Black is awesome if you're going to go with more darker tones. This paint is amazing. I use it for a lot of miniatures as well. Then we've got Tamiya. Tamiya paint is awesome. I use this as a super fine primer. It's about $9 a can. It's my go-to for everything. This is my Bastiladon that I'm going to actually use the black gloss primer on for my color change paints from Turbo Dork. You just apply this primer on and it actually helps the color change transition happen a little bit easier with a gloss primer. So just so you know, some miniatures that come resin require you to get a toothbrush and actually scrub the miniature to get the the processing plastic off of the miniature before it'll let you put any primer on it or paint. I usually take a toothbrush and I scrub it all over with hot water. You can use soap as well. Hot soapy water and a toothbrush goes a long way to get all that nasty junk off of the miniature before you go to prime it and paint it. If you do not do this step, you'll have a hard time getting any pieces to glue to the miniature, or getting primer onto the model itself will be difficult. So I always scrub it with a toothbrush and hot soapy water. Works every time. Next, we got the paint handle. This is a great alternative if you don't want to hold your miniatures and they're actually glued to a base. You can use this handle to prime your miniatures, or you can even paint them using the handle too as well. I usually airbrush with these a lot. They're very useful. We also have a large handle too as well, for miniatures that take a weird base size, or more like mounted miniatures that have a longer base. They have the larger bases that work too as well. There's also a large paint handle for priming miniatures and painting and airbrushing too as well. Check it out from Citadel. Next is my PPE, my protective equipment. I use this face mask before I prime and also when I airbrush. I put this on to protect myself because it's a lot of fumes you're breathing in and you want to stay protected. So get yourself a good face mask. This one works for me, and it works every time. Also, make sure your miniatures are spaced at a pretty good distance apart. You don't want them to be right up on each other when you're going to prime. Make sure you give them plenty of space to go ahead and prime them, so that way the paint hits all of them evenly. We're going to go ahead and use this Tamiya paint to go ahead and get started. This is my go-to primer. We're going to use this one to paint all 50 chain rasp. All right, that about sums it up. Let's get started. Okay, so make sure you shake your cans very well before you go to apply the primer. You can do above the miniatures. You can spray above the miniatures to get the tops going down, or you can go side to side, getting the fronts of the miniatures, and then turn the miniatures around backwards to get the back side of the miniature. That's usually the technique that I do. I try to stay at least 10 inches away from the miniature when I'm going to spray. You don't want to get too close when you're going to spray the primer, because then it'll cake up into the recesses and you won't see as much details as you normally would if you had put distance on the spray in the first place. So go ahead and shake it up really good, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Now I'm just going to start in the front, and I'm just going to go right to left, left to right, and just spray in spurts. You don't want to hold the button down and just release all the paint all at one time. You want to do it in spurts, going in nice even coats, kind of like a build-up, not like you're spraying it all just at one time. You're building up the coats as you go, and just going left to right. Slowly start to build that up, go left to right. Make sure you're hitting all of the points, and you can start to tell that they're all being covered, because you'll start to see the undercoat of the plastic being covered up. So just keep using this technique back and forth. Now I'm going to try to spray from the top angle and go from the head down to the feet. And I do this back and forth too as well to make sure I hit the back part of the miniature too. And this gets the back part of the miniature before you go to turn it around. Just helps for easy transition over to the back side. After you spray the front and the top side of the miniature, you can turn them all backwards to get the back side of the miniature to make sure that you're hitting the rest of the mini. And usually after this step, I usually try to do the method that I did before, where I hold it from the feet down, upside down, from the feet down to the head, and I see if there's any missing parts. Night Hunt is a little tricky because they have robes of ethereal, so you have to like flip them upside down, and you'll see a bunch of exposed parts that you didn't hit underneath their cloak, since they don't have legs or anything like that. So I found that after I sprayed these, I had to go back in and spray them for a third time after they dried for about 24 hours. Make sure your miniatures sit for about, a full day before you go to try to paint on them, to make sure the coat is on there and that you get no globby stuff on there. I also wanted to talk about temperature. You want to make sure that when you're priming your miniatures that it's in a nice warm and dry location. Usually if it's cold outside, it'll take longer for your primer to stick on the miniatures. So you want to make sure that it's at least room temperature, or going to be dry, or at least have some heat. It's better to airbrush in a warm environment than a cold environment. As you can see, I'm just using a box with a air filter inside of it, and I'm using a couple foam boards for protection while I prime my miniatures. I have this in my basement on a table, and the foam kind of protects the side so the paint's not getting out. And I have the filter inside of the box, so that way when I'm spraying, it hits the back of the filter and it doesn't go anywhere else. So you can do that if you're doing it inside of a house, or you can get yourself a nice box that has a ventilation system in there too as well, kind of like something that would suck up all the paint and spit it out outside. So that's if you want to get fancy, but yeah, I just have a little box that I've been using for years, and I just put on my protective gear. Afterwards, I turn a fan on and I open a window or open the door and let out all the paint fumes. Now we're gonna hit the back sides again and make sure those are fully covered, going back and forth with that back and forth motion, hitting up all the spots that I totally missed. If I see any green plastic, then I'll go back in and make sure I pay attention to those details and make sure it's covered. Keep in mind that you also can use an airbrush for primer too as well. The same techniques apply when you're using a primer in an airbrush. I have always used rattle can, so I've always used the can to prime my miniatures. I've never put it in the airbrush, even though I could possibly try it and see how it works. Some people prefer this method better, but I do like just going and buying the $10 cans. Citadel primers are usually around 20 bucks, so you can get those. They come in a bigger can too, and you're getting a lot more. So those are great primers. I use them all. Technically, I try to stay with at least 2 or 3 cans on deck at all times in between miniatures. Now we're gonna go through each one of these and just spray these and look for any mistakes and anything we missed. Hit them one more time with a 360 turn of the base, set them down, and move on to the next one. And this should be the last one coming up here. We're just gonna spray this one last time and check each miniature to make sure they're all good to go. And that's it for priming. Let them sit for 24 hours and you're good to go. Thanks, guys. Yeah. All right, guys, that about sums it up. That was the primers that I used to get my minis to the tabletop. In this video, I did use the Tamiya paint. It's the fine surface primer. It is awesome. It's my go-to for everything. I use that primer for almost all my miniatures. Unless I'm gonna go for more darker tones, then I'll go with like the Chaos Black or something like that. I do plan on using some more of this gray sear too as well. This is a great go-to for like a neutral type paint if you're going dark and light colors, or if you're just not sure where your paint scheme is gonna go. Gray is always a good neutral color that you can go with. The gloss primer is also awesome. I'm gonna use this for my color change paints on my Bastiladon, so I'll be painting that on stream and using some of this gloss primer. It is fantastic. Try it out if you see it in your marketplace or if you want to order it from online. But yeah, that's kind of the basic techniques that I use. It isn't too complicated. You just have to do a little bit of research. Make sure you're standing at a good distance from about like 10 inches away from your mini when you're spraying, and then that will kind of help get your miniatures painted and covered. Also too as well, you do want to make sure you're at a kind of like a good distance, but you want to go back and check all your minis too as well and make sure they're all covered with a good coat of paint. So hopefully these tips all worked, and like I said, if you're a new painter and you want to get into miniature wargaming, definitely check out some different primers and see which one best works for you. If you guys have some better techniques that you have used that you want to give some tips to me as well, since I'm a beginner, definitely comment down below and I'll take a look at those and take them in consideration. As always, guys, thank you guys for following my channel and liking and subscribing to Circus 36 Gaming channel. Hope this helps, and I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks. Bye.
I turn it up as loud as possible so you can hear it. Being yourself in a world of fake, so many fear it. It's kind of sad when you listen to these phony mother